Welcome back, my name is Jack. Thanks for tuning into another video. It's my goal to help creative music makers make better music at home. This video is going to be all about 61 key MIDI controller keyboards, specifically budget MIDI controller keyboards with 61 full-size keys under $300. A MIDI controller keyboard is crucial, in my opinion, in any home studio setup. Whether you are a piano player or not, I think every music producer should know their way around a piano keyboard. I've got my list of 61 key MIDI controllers under $300 coming up in just a moment. But before we get in that list, I want to take a moment to shamelessly plug my new sample and MIDI toolkit website, jackloops.com. If you want to check out that site, use the coupon code in the description below to get 50% off your entire order on the site. I'm uploading both paid and free packs and toolkits on that website. So if you're looking for high quality loops, one-shots, and MIDI files to completely up your producer game on a budget, Jack Loops is the website for you. And it's the #1 way that you can support me and the channel so that I can keep making videos just like this one. As we move through our list of MIDI controllers, if you want to compare any of the current prices or shop around yourself, there are Amazon links for each of the keyboards in the description below. Now, when I chose this list, I did pick a few different characteristics to narrow down my search, and these are the characteristics that I chose. All of the keyboard controllers had to have 61 keys. They had to be full-size keys, so no mini key controllers in this list. They also had to be USB enabled to connect to your computer for use with your DAW software. Ideally, I wanted them to have a hardware MIDI DIN port on the rear. Now, most of them do have this. There's a couple that don't. I'll let you know which ones don't. Now, a quick note, none of these MIDI controllers are DAW specific, which means they will work with any and all of your standard digital audio workstations. Now, a few of the controllers are designed for specific integration with certain DAWs, but again, I'll let you know which ones those are. The first keyboard on the list is the Nektar Panorama T6, and I gotta say, this keyboard is probably one of the more stylish looking controllers on our list. I don't know what it is about making the keyboard just fall off on the left edge that looks so cool to me, but we've seen this in Nektar's earlier, more expensive Panorama keyboard, so I'm excited to see similar aesthetics move into the more cheaper keyboard range. This is a fairly straightforward keyboard controller featuring 9 assignable sliders, buttons, 8 assignable knobs, and 8 color-changing illuminated drum pads. In addition, you've got a full transport and an LCD display that's going to make mapping and assigning controls a breeze. On the rear, we've got a USB port, a standard MIDI DIN output, and a foot switch and expression pedal input, as well as your on-off switch. Nektar keyboards have always been pretty well known for their DAW integration, and they work really seamlessly with a lot of major DAWs. Now, if you're an Ableton user, the Nektar is not pre-mapped to work with Ableton Live. It'll still work with Ableton Live, but the DAW integration is not supported. Moving on, we have a promising new offering from M Audio, and it's the M Audio Oxygen Pro 61. This is a new keyboard within the well-known and established Oxygen line, but I have to say this Oxygen Pro does seem like a brand new keyboard and not just an M Audio Oxygen with a facelift. When I look at the design of this keyboard, I definitely see an influence from M Audio's previous Code line of MIDI controllers, and I'm happy about that because those controllers always did tend to catch my eye. If finger drumming is your thing, this might be the keyboard for you, as it has twice the standard amount of drum pads with a total of 16 multicolor drum pads. You still have your typical 9 sliders and 8 knobs, as well as a host of other buttons and controls, and a fancy little LCD display to make programming and using the device a breeze. And just by looking at it, if you're an Ableton Live user, those drum pads would come in handy for use with Ableton's clip launching feature in Session View. On the rear of the keyboard, you have your standard MIDI DIN output to control hardware, your USB port, a sustain pedal input, and your power switch. Keyboard number 3 is the Arturia KeyLab Essential 61, and this is one of their slimmed down economy versions of their KeyLab line of keyboards. It does sport 9 programmable knobs and faders, so you will have plenty of options when it comes to mapping controllers to parameters within your DAW of choice. Now, not a lot of keyboards in this list come in white, so if color is a concern, you've got a white aesthetic going on in your studio, this could be the keyboard for you simply for that reason. In regard to the drum pads, we're back to the standard 8, but I've personally never really used the drum pads pads on controller keyboards, so I don't feel like that would be limiting in any way. If desk space is a concern, the KeyLab Essential has the mod and pitch wheel up on the upper left-hand corner instead of next to the keyboard itself, like a lot of the other keyboards, making the keyboard narrower altogether. There is a little LCD display with a control knob to allow you to sort through those different functions, features, and parameters, and better assist you in being able to use that keyboard with your setup. On the rear of the device, we have your MIDI DIN port, your USB jack, your sustain pedal input, and a DC power supply, which is nice if you want to use your controller with hardware and don't have a computer around to plug it in for power. Next up is one of my personal favorites as an Ableton user, and that's the Novation Launchkey 61. We're all the way up to Mark III, and they've made a lot of improvements over the years from the original Launchkey 61. Like I said, if you're an Ableton user, this keyboard is made for you. Now, any of the other keyboards on the list will work with Ableton, as MIDI is a universal standard. However, they physically built and designed this keyboard to work well with Ableton. So the layout, the pads, the buttons, the sliders, it's all made to work with Ableton. So all in all, I think it's a great option. It features synth action keys, 8 knobs, 9 faders, 16 color changing pads, dedicated transport controls, and a host of bundled software to get you up and running. On the back of the keyboard, you've got your sustain pedal, your USB jack, and your MIDI DIN. Let's move on. The next keyboard is one that you might not have heard of before, but it is still a great option, and it is the 61 key smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. All joking aside, next up we have the M Audio Oxygen Mark V. That's right, we're on the 5th version of this keyboard. Now I think they can sometimes get a bad rap for being a budget, low quality, cheap feeling keyboard, but for the price you're paying, I really don't think it's a bad option. The fact that there's 5 generations of this keyboard should show you that M Audio is actively listening to their users, trying to make improvements, and really attempting to have the Oxygen line of keyboards stand the test of time. With this keyboard, you're going to get your synth action keys, which are fully velocity sensitive, your typical 9 faders, 8 knobs, and 8 pads. And other than that, there's not a whole lot of fancy bells and whistles with this keyboard, but if you're looking for your first budget keyboard, a keyboard to perform with, or something to travel with, you're not afraid of getting damaged, banged around, or just thrown in the car, this keyboard does offer a great option for that. On the back, you've got your USB jack, sustain pedal input, and an on-off switch, but unfortunately there is no MIDI DIN output port, so that's a bit of a bummer for me. But nowadays, USB MIDI is totally capable, so if you're not in the need for MIDI DIN specifically, don't let the absence of that port be a deal breaker for you. All right, now another offering from Nektar. This is the Impact GXP 61. Now I think the selling point for this keyboard is the semi-weighted velocity and aftertouch sensitive keys. You're missing out a little bit on the lack of knobs and faders, but if you're a piano player and you need a keyboard controller with a semi-weighted feel and aftertouch as well as velocity sensitivity, this keyboard might be the option for you. It does feature different selectable velocity curves so you can fine-tune your playing, as well as 14 different LED RGB changeable buttons for you to map and control to various parameters within your DAW software. On the back of the GXP 61, you've got both an expression pedal and a sustain pedal input. You also have your MIDI DIN port, your USB jack, your DC power supply, and your on-off switch. Next up, we have a true staple of the budget keyboard controller world, and that is the M Audio Keystation 61. We're up to the 3rd generation of improvements, which is really cool. If you're looking for a tried and tested, budget-friendly, small footprint MIDI keyboard controller to throw on your desk or to travel with, the M Audio Keystation Mark III 61 key is a really solid option. Yeah, you don't have all the faders, knobs, and drum pads, but sometimes when you're trying to save money, simple is better, and there's plenty of well-known producers on YouTube who have been using these keyboard controllers for quite some time. On the back, you've got a host of ports, including your power input, which gives you the option to run it with a DC power supply or off USB, which is cool, your MIDI DIN output, which is a must-have for me, your sustain pedal, and your power switch. Next up is the Alesis V61 keyboard controller. Now I did have one of the smaller 25 key versions of this keyboard, and I gotta say I did return it because I just wasn't crazy about the overall feel and build quality of the unit. But I guess you kind of get what you pay for. Now my biggest complaint about this keyboard is that all of the controls are on the left side of the key bed itself. Now I get it, they made it pretty narrow from top to bottom, but it does end up being a lot longer than a lot of the other 61 key controllers on this list, especially considering it's so short from top to bottom. I just think the overall shape and geometry of this board is a little bit weird, and it's not really what I would be looking for in a budget home studio setup. On the back, all you've got is your sustain pedal input and your USB jack for MIDI and power, so you're a little limited there. Now, real quick, Alesis did just announce a second Mark II version of their V61 that's coming out real soon. It's currently on pre-order on Sweetwater. So if you have used the Alesis controllers in the past and you like those and you like the blue and you want a V61, maybe wait until the Mark II comes out, but that's just me. This one is the Nektar Impact LX61 Plus, and I think for the price, it's a good option, especially if you want those pads, faders, and knobs. This keyboard does feature really solid integration for a lot of your major DAWs other than Ableton Live. So do keep that in mind. Nektar does not have license to integrate with Ableton Live. Again, it will still work just fine with Ableton Live, but you will have to map all of the parameters manually. They won't just automatically link up to your software. I do like the geometry of this keyboard. I like that it's square and blocky. I think everything's laid out pretty well. On the back, no MIDI DIN port, but there is an on-off switch, sustain pedal, and USB jack. So pretty much what we'd expect there otherwise. This next keyboard is made by Samson, and I've got a few other of their products, but I've never really looked at or reviewed any of their keyboard controllers before. At first glance, this looks like a total no frills budget option. It is one of the cheapest 61 key keyboards on the list, and I would be a little hesitant to buy this just because I would be worried that the actual quality of the key bed itself would be bare minimum and might be difficult, especially if you're trying to record or play in parts with more velocity sensitivity, stuff like that actually makes a difference. Now, if you're looking for a budget keyboard to throw in a bag, throw in the car, travel with, use as a mobile studio setup, this could be the one for you. It's got 61 full-size keys, so really what more do you need? Surprisingly, the back does feature sustain, MIDI DIN, USB, super standard and to be expected there. And like I mentioned with the KeyLab, one of the biggest selling points might be the fact that it's white, and that's more rare these days. So if that's the kind of aesthetic you have in your studio and you're looking for a white keyboard, this could be a good option. I'm still using my old OG M Audio Axiom controllers. I've got a 49 key and a 61 key. They've served me well. I've been using them for about 12 years now when I started music production. And because of that, I'm a little loyal to M Audio with my budget MIDI controller keyboards. And that's why I've got to say my favorite budget 61 key MIDI keyboard controller for budget home studio setups has got to be the M Audio Oxygen Pro 61. If I had to go out and buy a 61 key MIDI controller right now, that's the one that I would buy. I'm still using my old OG M Audio Axiom controllers, and I think the Oxygen Pro is another functional, value-packed option. Comment below if I missed your favorite 61 key MIDI controller, and don't forget to like and subscribe for the YouTube algorithm. I will see you in the next one. Peace.